Public shaming in national newspapers, arbitrary arrests, and even beatings by police. These are just a few of the consequences that those protesting for an end to Israel's war on Gaza say they face in Germany. But why are German authorities so committed to stifling any criticism of Israeli actions? And what does it all mean for democracy and human rights in the country? I'm Anelise Borges, and this is The Stream.
Free Palestine! This is fascism in Germany, fascism in Germany, please!
Activists in Germany say one of the consequences of Israel's war on Gaza is a climate of fear in the country, with Palestinian voices facing harassment and even violence. Joining us today are some of those voices here to share their experience with us. Salah, an activist that had his house raided by German police and has 17 ongoing complaints against the German government. He's joining us from Brussels. Tariq, Suleiman, an activist and a member of Student Coalition Berlin. He's joining us from there. And Cinin Abuzeed, a student and activist, also joining us from Berlin. Thank you all so much for being part of the conversation today. Let's start by taking a look at the German government's stance when it comes to Israel. Here's a statement from the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz on October 12 last year. He said there is only one place for Germany at this time, and that is by Israel's side. This is what we mean when we say Israel's security is part of Germany's raison d'etat. Several times since then, German authorities have reiterated their unconditional support for Israel, militarily increasing its arms exports by tenfold, legally opposing the ICJ case against the country, and rhetorically, any domestic criticism of the Israeli government has been met by a harsh reaction. This is what happened back in April when activists organized the Palestine Congress in Berlin.
They're also trying to silence people sitting here.
Police showed up, cut off electricity, accused participants of sharing illegal content, and eventually shut down the conference and sent everybody home. The next day, when people took to the streets to protest that, riot police responded with force, tear gas, and arrests. Salah, you were at the Congress and at these protests. You've been talking about how this kind of intimidation has taken a whole new dimension. You have received visits by the German police in your home 3 times. The first 2 were warnings. The third time you said they raided your house. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, so I don't think it's a new phenomenon for any Palestinian or people that show solidarity with Palestine to be attacked or harassed by the German government. We have seen bans on pro-Palestine protests also several years ago, especially when it comes to the Nakba demonstration. So I think what happened since the 7th of October is a crackdown on those people that show solidarity with Palestine. And that is being met with a huge different reaction from the German authorities, which includes violence, intimidation, house raids, and intimidation visits. So what happened basically was that the police officers several times came to my home and told me that I pose a threat to public safety because of my activism, because of my Instagram posts, and because me speaking basically up for human rights and advocacy for Palestine. On that day, the 22nd of March, I think it was around 8 or more police officers showed up at my door close to like 6 a.m., even earlier, and were knocking vehemently, woke me up, and I opened the door and they were standing there with their guns, took me to the side, and I said, here's a warrant and we're going to raid your house now. Obviously, you know, I couldn't believe what was happening. They started to search my home and gave me a letter that explained why they have this right to do so. And yeah, and it took me really by surprise, and I was quite shocked. I mean, I was...
That is quite a harsh measure indeed. Tariq, can I turn to you? What's been your experience so far in this particular context of this Israeli war on Gaza?
Well, as a scholar or a student, not only an activist, besides witnessing state violence on the streets and elsewhere by the police and so on, I have also witnessed a catastrophic increase of repression and silencing of any semblance of Palestinian solidarity in universities. German academic institutions are not only publicly aligning themselves with the state's complicit politics, but also actively repressing and silencing the voices of students who dare to speak up for Palestinians, all while claiming this pseudo neutrality or fostering an environment for a constructive dialogue or open discourse. So we have seen police violence and brutal arrests of peaceful student protesters on campus several times over the last few months, 3 of which only happened during the last month, when students organized peaceful sit-ins or encampments, like in many other countries, to demand an end to German complicity in the genocide of Palestinians. And of course, this also shows the extent to which how widespread this climate of fear and intimidation is. It's not only through the authorities or through the police, it's somewhere within the entire establishment of Germany.
In different contexts as well, in different parts of German life. Cinin, what about you? What's been your experience these days?
I think for me, especially because I don't live in Germany anymore, I had a very stark comparison between where I live and what Germany is doing right now. And personally, every time I do go back to Germany and I join these protests, various protests, I've been arrested every time I have joined. And it is a very stark representation of how Germany is very violent in the way they do it as well. I feel like we've also seen an increase in violence against protesters throughout the months, as things, of course, get worse. And it has been used and utilized to stigmatize and incite against the Palestinian community in Germany. And to me, personally, I see a huge issue, especially having so much family within Germany that are Palestinian, so many young cousins, siblings, where I struggle to see how we can foster our own lives in Germany if this political discussion keeps on being as repressed as it is being repressed right now. And it just...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's just because some activists have been reporting these different kinds of pressure. Some even say they've been shamed in articles published by national newspapers. Take a look.
Hey, I want to tell you about something that happened to me, and I would like to hear your opinion on what we as a community should do next. So here's the situation. Yesterday, an article was released in Germany claiming that I'm anti-Semitic because I'm boycotting buying products from companies that support Israel's economy. I want to make one thing really clear. We are not anti-Semitic because we're boycotting products from a company that supports a country that is currently being investigated for genocide in front of the ICJ because it slaughtered tens of thousands of people. However, as a result of this article, there have been hundreds of very threatening messages, calls for me to lose my job and for me to be deported.
She did lose her job, by the way. Salah, what is your reading of how German media are reporting the war and those protesting against it?
Yeah, I know Helen very well. And, the German media has been targeting a lot of different activists across Germany right from the start. There's been several broadcasted, TV shows about me exposing not only my activism, but also where I live and, where I work, and being not always showing the full picture of what we're actually reporting or what we're trying to express, but basically just trying to label you as a terrorist sympathizer and an anti-Semite. And these are the two labels you will constantly get whenever you just show a tiny bit of empathy, not even solidarity, just a tiny bit of empathy with the Palestinian people. And that is something that we see throughout Germany happening on larger scale and continuously. And it's really dangerous because it's amplifying racism and discrimination. For the majority of us who grew up in Germany with a migration background, racism and discrimination is something that we would experience on a daily basis. However, the amount of aggression we experience daily on the street, not only from the police, but from regular citizens and neighbors or people that work with us, is horrendous, and it's increasing by the day.
Cinin, what is your impression? And in terms of social media, on the other hand, do you get the same kind of criticism online, or did you find community there?
I mean, I definitely found community within the past few months, but I think especially because I posted a video about my experiences at the Tel Aviv airport, where I was deported from for not having a valid German citizenship, which was not true, based on my Palestinian heritage. After that video went viral, it really stuck with people. And I think I have experienced a lot of racism and hatred because of that, because suddenly a certain amount of people that saw this video that never found any justification for me not being let in and for justification for the things that happened there, suddenly found October 7th as a justification to incite against me, but also other people. And I think that is the most dangerous part of how Germany narrates, and especially the language they use to narrate the discussion around Palestine, is that they directly and personally harm the individuals, their German citizens, Palestinians in general. They incite people to be even more racist, to be even more xenophobic, and it just has created this atmosphere in Germany that is there's a lot of tension and there's a lot of aggression going on. And I mean, we've also seen that with the recent votes for the European Parliament. I think that came as a direct effect of how Germany treats this discussion as well.
It is a very sad context here that you were painting. Salah, you mentioned that any kind of show of support for Palestine had been prohibited even before this Israeli war on Gaza. I want to share something with you guys and then get your reaction. Take a look.
That was really bad. Yeah, it really was. I'm so sorry. You should be. But let me tell you right now, I learned my lesson. Good. I mean, you can't undo the past, but the least you can do is unconditionally support another nationalist state that will forever dehumanize, ethnically cleanse, and persecute a population. I'm sorry, what? Look, I got you. Don't even worry about it. Leave it to me. That's not the lesson, though. I thought you were going to say the lesson was never support or allow fascism, dehumanization, or genocide ever again. No? You don't? No? No, okay. Well, I think that's a lesson for me, so I'm gonna oppose the whole ethno-nationalism, ethnic cleansing kind of thing. No, I can't let you do that. You can't let me do that. Why? That's anti-Semitic, man. Dude, what? By the way, what's up with all those Nazis running around back there? All of them? Oh, they're fine. They're with me, so don't worry about it. They're literal Nazis. I see about it. They're cool. Relax, man. You're too jumpy. Anyway, I gotta go deport some Arabs. You're gonna go do what? Never forget. Oh, don't let me catch you at a protest, huh?
Tariq, would you agree with Lucas, the creator of that video?
Yes, absolutely. And I would also add that the clip from Lucas is a very accurate description of how Germany deals with its past, as they call it, or I would even say how they compartmentalize the entire national identity into this one aspect that washes the Germans' hands of the past, of the guilt, of the atrocities that the Nazis have committed towards Jews and other marginalized groups. And I think it touches upon also a very important point, which is how Germany deals with a very large population of immigrants. Because it's a very big part of the German national identity, this entire culture of remembrance, as it's called here as well. And while it seems to be simple, but immigrants here are always asked or expected to be well integrated And at the same time, there is this monopoly over the memory of the Holocaust, for instance. And this brings us to this paradox that how are immigrants supposed to be integrated if they are not supposed to remember? It's what social theorists also call migrant double bind, that it's an issue that completely sidelines immigrants and only tokenizes immigrants when politicians want to use them for their election campaigns, like what happened with the Social Democrats in the previous federal elections. And now it's the same Social Democrats in the government who are talking about imported anti-Semitism, or that now we can deport these immigrants again if we like.
I want to bring in another point. Here's Jewish peace activist Udi Raz's take on Germany's unwavering support to Israel. Take a look.
The reason why Germany supports Israel also now with its ongoing genocide is rooted with Germany's attempt to come to terms with its own genocidal past. We should keep in mind, though, that today Germany's political elite is invested in its own nationalist project in order to define the uniqueness of German identity. In this context, Muslims, and specifically Arabs, are often marked as the big other to this Germanness. For Germany's political elite, Zionism and Judaism are simply the same thing, because Zionism offers German nationalists the ideological ground upon which they can claim that Muslims, and specifically Arabs, are essentially anti-Semitic. As such, this is the argument, they would pose a danger for Germany, the Germany that likes to think of itself as a safe place for Jews. Ironically, in practice, Germany's political elite is not committed to the protection of Jews as Jews. Instead, Germany's political elite is committed to the protection only of those Jews who are willing to reproduce anti-Muslim and anti-Arab racism. In other words, Zionist Jews.
Salah, I saw you raising your hand before. I want to also ask you about this recent poll that suggested almost 70% of Germans think that the Israeli response to the attacks on October 7th, that response is unjustified and that has claimed too many lives. It doesn't seem that this majority are out in the streets, though, protesting. Why do you think that is? Is there a generational gap here? How do you explain that?
Yeah, I do think that, the reality of growing up here in Germany is, whenever you want to talk about Palestine, if at school, work, or in university, it's really not a popular topic to talk about, and people tend to just shy away and, just switch topics. So also nothing new. I do think that people, or the German population, really isn't so political, isn't so much out there, and they really struggle to talk about this issue because they're constantly reminded by this remembrance culture on the Holocaust, and they cannot make this differentiation between anti-Zionism or criticizing Israel and anti-Semitism. And that is the huge issue that I see. Me as a Palestinian, I don't need to talk about anti-Semitism. It is not my discourse. It's the discourse of the Germans. They should make sure that they understand what it is. And what they're doing is construing this really important issue of anti-Semitism by calling it also, anti-Zionism, and conflating these definitions, which I think really relativizes what anti-Semitism is. And that is the core issue that I see with Germany, is this not having the capability of differentiating those causes. Why I raised my hand, though, earlier was because in Germany, we don't have any political representation whatsoever when it comes to the genocide in Gaza. There is no single party, especially not the mainstream parties, that would support any stance that criticizes Israel. And that has been the issue right from the start, when we were writing and talking and disrupting elected officials. We would be ignored or met with, we will support Israel no matter what. Which is why we have to take it to the streets to make ourselves heard, especially in Berlin, where you have around 50,000 Palestinians that live there in the diaspora, but the whole image of the city is Israel flags no matter where you go.
I want to bring this conversation into the context of Europe here, because Germany is Europe's largest economy, has a huge influence on the bloc. The president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, is a German citizen. And Cinin had an eventful encounter with her. Take a look.
I'm sorry. 1,000 people are dead because of you. You're a war criminal.
The results of EU elections earlier this month are yet another indication of the difficulties of tying the global solidarity movement with Gaza to mainstream European politicians and politics. Cinin, why do you think the far right has made such gains in the European Parliament despite the moment in the streets?
I think the reason why they've made so much progress is simply because they've done such an excellent job at polarizing and basically like psychologically segregating the citizens based on xenophobic, racist, discriminatory profiles. I think especially when we look at the German media, it's the best example, in my opinion, to reflect on this like one story, one narrative economy that has been spread throughout Europe. I think, yes, of course, even though they all go within the European Union and there's group decisions being made, we see that in every single European state, and that should be very, very alarming to us. And we've tried to mitigate, we've tried to talk, we've tried to be part of this liberal conversation, but at some point this liberal conversation just becomes obnoxious, and it's almost a trap that they have created for us to say, yes, if you talk, then we'll take you seriously. But at the end of the day, we can talk all we want. We can talk to, I've talked to so many of these politicians. I've been part of the political scene in Berlin, especially my whole life. I was a representative of children's parliament, and it has gotten me nothing, even as a Palestinian representative, as a German citizen. And to then incite against those who take to the streets, who exercise their democratic rights, and frame it and stigmatize them in the way they did.
That is super sad. That is super sad to hear you say that it's gotten you nothing. I want to give the opportunity for each one of you to give me a final thought here, very briefly, if you please. I wonder if you think that there is an opportunity here. I mean, we're having this conversation. We're having multiple conversations about the state of affairs in Germany. Would you say there is an opportunity for a true reckoning here? Do you feel hopeful at all? Salah, you go first. Very briefly, please.
I don't feel hopeful with the current government. I don't feel hopeful for Germans to speak up now because we're 9 months into the genocide. And if you haven't talked yet, you have proactively decided to stay silent. And that makes you, in my view, complicit. So, no, I'm not really helpful when it comes to Germany. I'm hopeful for the rest of the international community.
Tariq?
Quite frankly, I'm also rather pessimistic, especially when it comes to the German government or politicians or institutions. I think the only hope for this country might be if a large enough mass of the population starts to properly reflect on their past and what that means. And instead of monopolizing the discourse on anti-Semitism and shifting the blame always towards the bad immigrants, perhaps start to look at the mirror instead and think about what the unconditional support for Israel and for Zionism actually means for the marginalized population here in Germany.
Cinin, your take?
I think I wouldn't center my view on hope specifically, but I would say as a German citizen, I have the right to exercise my rights, and I will not let anyone take away those rights from me. And I think especially as living in Germany and seeing some kind of future in Germany, I don't see a reason why I should not be entitled to those rights. So it's not about hope to me. It's more about how everything will come together at the end of the day. It always comes together.
Cinin, Tariq, and Salah, thank you all so much for sharing your experience and your views with us. It's been great having you here on the stream. And thank you all for watching. Don't forget, you can help us build the next episode of the stream. If you have a conversation or a topic that you'd like to see featured here, use the hashtag or the handle AJStream, and we will look into it. Take care, and I'll see you soon.